The grand hall of the Marlowe Hotel was a symphony of opulence. Glittering chandeliers hung like jeweled constellations, their soft light casting a golden glow over polished marble floors. The room hummed with polite laughter, the clink of crystal glasses, and the murmur of conversations between society's elite. Ethan Blake stood near the bar, his tailored midnight blue tuxedo immaculate, yet his expression betrayed his disinterest. Charity galas were a staple in his world, a necessary display of generosity to maintain his empire's spotless image. Yet, tonight, something felt different. A nagging sense of anticipation prickled at his thoughts. He took a sip of champagne, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd with practiced detachment. And then, he saw her. She stood near the edge of the dance floor, radiant in an emerald gown that clung elegantly to her figure. Her dark hair fell in waves over her shoulders, and her smile, though faint, illuminated her face. Ethan's chest tightened. It wasn't just the striking resemblance to Sophia, it was Sophia. He blinked, unsure if his mind was playing tricks on him. How long had it been? 10 years. A flood of memories rushed in. Her laughter, her kindness, her tear-filled eyes the last time he saw her. Yet there she was, more poised and beautiful than ever. But what truly shook him was the sight of the 3 teenagers standing beside her. Ethan's grip on his glass tightened as he studied them. The resemblance was undeniable. The boy on the left, lanky and confident, had Ethan's jawline. The girl in the center, her hair a cascade of chestnut waves, bore the same piercing gaze that had earned Ethan respect and fear in boardrooms. The smallest boy, with his intense eyes and wiry frame, was a mirror image of Ethan at that age. His heart thundered in his chest. He barely registered the glass slipping from his hand until it shattered on the marble floor. Heads turned toward him, but he ignored them, his gaze fixed on Sophia and the teenagers. His legs moved of their own accord, propelling him across the room. Sophia turned at the sound of his approaching footsteps. Her expression shifted, surprise, followed by shock, and finally settling into a guarded mask. "Ethan," she said, her tone flat. "Sophia," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. His gaze darted to the teenagers. "Are they?" Sophia stiffened. Her eyes darted between Ethan and the children, who were now watching the exchange with curiosity. She stepped forward, her body language protective. "This isn't the place for this conversation," she said sharply, her voice low enough to avoid drawing attention. But Ethan wasn't backing down. "We need to talk. Now." Sophia's jaw tightened. She placed a hand on the shoulder of the tallest boy, guiding him and the others toward the exit. "Come on, kids. Let's go." Ethan stood frozen, his mind racing. He had spent a lifetime mastering control, but in that moment, it slipped through his fingers. Sophia's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she drove home, her knuckles white from the pressure. The kids were unusually quiet in the backseat, exchanging glances, but saying nothing. Sophia's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Seeing Ethan after all these years had struck a nerve she thought had healed. The past she had buried, painfully meticulously, was now staring her in the face, threatening to unravel everything she had built. Her thoughts turned to the night that had changed her life forever. She had stood at the altar, waiting for the man she loved to appear. But Ethan never came. Instead, his mother had arrived with a cold expression and an even colder explanation. Ethan had chosen a different path. Humiliation had burned through her like fire that day. But it wasn't until weeks later, when she discovered she was pregnant, that the pain transformed into something else: resolve. The doctor's words echoed in her memory. Triplets. She had been terrified, overwhelmed, but determined to give her children the best life possible. Now, Ethan was back, and he had seen them. She pulled into the driveway of their modest suburban home and parked the car. Turning to face her children, she forced a smile. "Go inside, okay? I'll be there in a minute." The kids hesitated but obeyed, disappearing through the front door. Sophia stayed in the car, her breathing uneven. How could she protect them from Ethan? Would he even want to be involved? The next morning, her fears were confirmed. As she opened the curtains in the living room, she froze. Ethan was there, leaning casually against a sleek black car parked at the curb. Sophia stepped outside, her heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. Ethan straightened, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," she snapped. "You have no right to be here." Ethan's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. "Sophia, I need to know. Are they mine?" Sophia flinched as if the words had physically struck her. She folded her arms across her chest. "You don't get to walk back into my life and ask that. You left, Ethan. You don't deserve answers." "I didn't know," he shot back, his voice tinged with desperation. "I didn't know about them, Sophia. If I had, You what?" she interrupted, her voice trembling with anger. "Would you have stayed? Fought for us? Don't lie to me, Ethan." He hesitated, and she saw the flicker of guilt in his eyes. Sophia stepped closer, her voice lowering. "You broke me, Ethan, and I picked up the pieces. Don't you dare think you can come back and shatter what I've built." Ethan took a step back, his composure faltering. "I made a mistake, Sophia, but I want to make it right. Let me see them." Her laugh was bitter. "You don't get to decide that." With that, she turned and walked back inside, slamming the door behind her. Ethan stood on the sidewalk, his resolve hardening. He had lost control once, but this time, he wouldn't walk away. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains of Sophia's modest kitchen as she prepared breakfast. The clatter of plates and the smell of toast filled the air, but her mind was elsewhere. The previous night's encounter with Ethan had left her shaken. She glanced at the twins, Emma and Lucas, seated at the table, whispering animatedly. Their expressions carried an unusual mix of excitement and confusion. Meanwhile, Oliver, the youngest, sat quietly, stirring his cereal with a distracted air. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "Mom, who was that man?" Sophia froze, the question slicing through the fragile calm. She turned to face them, trying to steady her breathing. "Just someone from my past. Nothing to worry about. But he looked at us like he knew us," Lucas pressed. "And we kind of look like him." Oliver looked up sharply at this, his brow furrowed. Why was he here? Sophia placed a plate of toast on the table and sat down. "I know you're curious, but it's complicated. What matters is that you're safe, and I'll always protect you." Her words were meant to reassure, but the twins exchanged skeptical glances. They weren't satisfied, and Sophia knew it. Across town, Ethan sat in his high-rise office, staring at a photo of Sophia he had pulled from an old storage box. The image, taken during a carefree summer in their youth, was worn at the edges, but her smile remained vivid. His assistant entered, breaking his reverie. "Mr. Blake, I've compiled the information you requested about Ms. Carter." Ethan gestured for the folder, flipping through its contents. The pages detailed Sophia's struggles, her move to the suburbs, her modest income, and her work as a community volunteer. It painted a picture of a resilient woman who had built a life for her children despite the odds. But it wasn't enough. Ethan needed to know them, not just their circumstances. "Arrange a meeting with a family lawyer," he said, his voice firm. As the door clicked shut, Ethan leaned back in his chair. The question he had avoided for years now burned in his mind. What if they really are mine? That evening, as the children played in the living room, Sophia sat on the couch with a cup of tea. The tension from earlier still lingered, and she could feel the weight of their unspoken questions. "Mom," Lucas began cautiously, "if we don't know him, why did he look like he wanted to know us?" Sophia sighed, setting her tea down. "Some people come into our lives unexpectedly. That doesn't mean they belong there." Emma tilted her head. "But what if he does? Belong, I mean." Sophia stared at her daughter, struck by her insight. The words stirred something deep within her, a fear that the children might one day want to know Ethan, regardless of her efforts to keep him away. "Finish your homework," Sophia said, standing abruptly. "It's late." But as she walked away, her heart ached. The past she had worked so hard to bury was resurfacing, and there was no clear path forward. The next morning, Sophia woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. She grabbed it from the nightstand, squinting at the screen. A message from an unknown number read, "We need to talk. I won't give up." She recognized the persistence in Ethan's words and felt her frustration boil. Later that day, she found him waiting outside the community center where she worked. Dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit, Ethan looked as out of place as a diamond in a sandbox. "What are you doing here?" Sophia demanded as she stepped outside. Ethan straightened, his jaw set. "I'm not here to cause a scene. I just want to talk." "We've talked," she said, crossing her arms. "There's nothing more to say." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Sophia, I made mistakes. I know that, but I can't walk away from this. I need to know them." Sophia's resolve faltered momentarily at the sincerity in his voice, but she quickly recovered. "You don't get to need anything from us. You left, Ethan. That was your choice." "I didn't know about them," he replied, his voice low but steady. "If I had, I would have stayed," she interrupted. "Please, don't insult me." The tension between them was palpable. Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'm not here to take anything from you, Sophia, but they deserve to know the truth." Sophia stared at him, her anger mingling with fear. "And what happens when they find out? Do you think they'll just welcome you with open arms? That everything will go back to how it was?" "No," Ethan admitted, "but it's a start." Sophia shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "You don't understand what you're asking." "Then help me understand," Ethan pleaded. For a moment, the years of pain and regret between them hung in the air. Sophia's voice trembled as she replied, "Leave us alone, Ethan. It's what you're good at." She turned and walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone on the steps of the center, his determination unshaken. Back at home, Sophia paced the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She had avoided the reporters who camped outside, but her children were growing restless. "Mom, what's going on?" Emma asked, her voice filled with worry. "Nothing you need to worry about," Sophia replied quickly. "But those people keep asking questions," Lucas added. "Why are they saying he's our dad?" Sophia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "Because people love gossip, and they'll say anything to get attention." Oliver frowned from his spot on the couch. "Is it true?" Sophia froze. The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken tension. She turned to face her youngest son, her heart breaking at the uncertainty in his eyes. "We'll talk about this soon," she said softly. "But for now, trust me to handle it." The words fell hollow, but it was all she could offer. Ethan sat in his car outside Sophia's house, his thoughts a chaotic mess. He hadn't slept since the magazine article dropped, knowing it had crossed a line he didn't authorize. He wanted to fix things, but every attempt to approach Sophia had been met with a slammed door or silence. Finally, he stepped out of the car, determination in his stride. He knocked on her door, bracing for the inevitable confrontation. Sophia opened it cautiously, her face a mixture of anger and exhaustion. "What do you want, Ethan?" "I didn't know about the article," he began. "I swear, I never wanted this to happen." Sophia folded her arms. "And yet it happened. My kids' faces are plastered across tabloids because of you." "I know," Ethan admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. "That's why I'm here. Let me help fix it." Sophia's laugh was bitter. "Fix it? How, Ethan? By throwing more money at the problem? This isn't one of your business deals." "I don't want to fight with you, Sophia," he said earnestly. "I just want to see my children." Her defenses wavered, and for a moment, she saw a glimmer of the man she once loved. "This isn't just about you," she said quietly. "They're my whole world. I won't let anyone hurt them." "I'm not trying to hurt them," Ethan replied. "I'm trying to be part of their lives. Please, let me prove that I can be a good father." Sophia studied him for a long moment before sighing. "Fine, but this is on my terms. You'll meet them here, in my house, and only when I say it's okay." Ethan nodded, relief washing over him. "Thank you, Sophia." The next evening, Ethan sat in Sophia's living room, facing 3 pairs of curious eyes. The twins, Emma and Lucas, looked at him with open curiosity, while Oliver remained guarded, his arms crossed over his chest. "So you're our dads?" Emma asked hesitantly. Ethan swallowed hard. "Yes, I am." Lucas leaned forward. "Why weren't you here before?" The question stung, but Ethan didn't shy away. "Because I didn't know about you," he said honestly. "But I'm here now, and I want to get to know you." Oliver snorted. "Why should we care? You've been gone our whole lives." Sophia shot him a warning glance, but Ethan held up a hand. "It's okay. He has every right to feel that way." The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Ethan knew earning their trust wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to try. Sophia sat at her kitchen table, her head in her hands. The letter from Ethan's lawyer lay before her, its formal language a stark contrast to the chaos it had unleashed in her mind. Petition for visitation rights. The words were cold and unyielding, and they brought a crushing weight of reality. Ethan wasn't backing down. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She ignored it, but the second buzz prompted her to check. It was a message from her best friend, Mia. "You okay?" "Saw the news. Call me." Sophia sighed, typing back quickly. "I'll explain later." Across town, Ethan stood in the wood-paneled office of his attorney, his gaze distant as the lawyer explained the process. "Visitation rights are straightforward, Mr. Blake. However, given the children's age and Sophia's strong involvement in their lives, this may not be an easy case." "I'm not here to fight Sophia," Ethan said firmly. "I just want to be part of their lives." The lawyer nodded, but seemed skeptical. "The court may not see it that way. They'll ask why you've waited until now to pursue this." Ethan clenched his fists. He'd been asking himself that same question since the night he saw Sophia at the gala. He had no excuses, just a gnawing regret that wouldn't let him rest. The first court hearing was scheduled 2 weeks later. Sophia arrived with a tight jaw and a pounding heart. She had dressed carefully, projecting calm and confidence, though inside, she was storm. Ethan was already there, seated at the front with his lawyer. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. Sophia avoided his gaze and focused on her attorney, who offered a reassuring nod. The proceedings were formal and clinical, yet every word cut deep. The judge asked pointed questions about Sophia's life, Ethan's sudden reappearance, and, most painfully, the children's welfare. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he stood, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "I didn't know about my children until recently," he began. "If I had known, I would have been there. I take full responsibility for my absence, but I'm here now. I want to be a father to them." Sophia's stomach twisted. His words sounded sincere, but the damage had already been done. After hours of arguments and rebuttals, the judge adjourned the hearing, postponing a decision until the next session. Outside the courtroom, Ethan approached Sophia. "Sophia, please," he said softly. "This doesn't have to be a battle." She turned to him, her eyes blazing. "You made it one the moment you involved lawyers." Ethan's shoulders sagged as she walked away, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The following days passed in a haze for Sophia. Every glance at her children felt like a reminder of the growing storm around them. She kept her explanations vague, telling them only that grown-up problems were being handled. Meanwhile, Ethan wrestled with his next steps. He wanted to prove himself to Sophia and the children, but felt like every move he made only pushed her further away. His frustration grew as he replayed their interactions, wondering where he'd gone wrong. It was during a sleepless night that Ethan decided to confront an uncomfortable truth. He needed answers, not just from Sophia, but about the circumstances that had led to their separation. He reached out to someone he hadn't spoken to in years, his former housekeeper, Morgan. Morgan had been a constant presence in his life during his youth, a confidant who had always spoken her mind. When she answered his call, her voice was warm but tinged with surprise. "Ethan Blake, it's been a long time. I need your help, Morgan," Ethan said. I need the truth about what happened with Sophia. Why she thinks I abandoned her. Morgan's pause was long and heavy. Meet me tomorrow, she said finally. There are things you need to know. The next day, Morgan sat across from Ethan in a quiet cafe. She was older now, her once black hair streaked with silver, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. You were young, Ethan, she began, her voice measured. And you had a lot of people making decisions for you. What do you mean? He asked, leaning forward. Morgan sighed. It was your mother. She told me Sophia wasn't suitable. She wanted to protect your future and made sure Sophia would never get close enough to hurt it. Ethan froze. What did she do? She convinced Sophia you had left willingly, Morgan said, her tone tinged with regret. She told her you didn't want the responsibility of a family, and she made sure you never knew about the pregnancy. Ethan's chest tightened as the weight of her words sank in. His mother, the woman he had trusted implicitly, had orchestrated the very betrayal Sophia had accused him of. She lied to both of us, Ethan murmured, his voice shaking. Morgan reached out and touched his hand gently. You have a chance to make things right, Ethan. Don't waste it. As Ethan left the cafe, his emotions were a tumult of anger, regret, and determination. He had to tell Sophia the truth, no matter the cost. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the large bay windows of Sophia's living room. Ethan sat stiffly on the couch, his hands resting awkwardly on his knees. Across from him, Emma and Lucas stared with curiosity, while Oliver remained in the corner, his arms crossed in silent defiance. So, Lucas began, his voice breaking the silence. You're really our dad? Yes, Ethan replied softly, his throat tight. I know it's hard to understand, but I didn't know about you until recently. Emma leaned forward, her expression skeptical. Why didn't you know? Ethan glanced at Sophia, who stood by the doorway, arms folded and watching like a hawk. He took a deep breath. It's complicated. I made mistakes, and I wasn't there when I should have been. But I want to make up for it now. Oliver snorted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. So, what? You just show up and expect us to care? Oliver, Sophia warned, her voice sharp. But Ethan held up a hand. It's okay, he said, turning to his youngest son. You don't have to care right away. I understand why you'd feel that way. But I'm here to prove that I'm serious about being in your lives. Oliver rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, but Emma's gaze softened slightly. What do you want from us? She asked. Nothing, Ethan said quickly. I don't want to take anything from you. I just want to get to know you. Lucas tilted his head. And how are you planning to do that? A small smile tugged at Ethan's lips. Well, how about I start by taking you all out somewhere? You can choose. Anything you want. The twins exchanged glances, and for the first time, a flicker of excitement crossed their faces. Can we go to the aquarium? Emma asked hesitantly. Ethan nodded without hesitation. Absolutely. Whenever you're ready. Oliver's voice cut through their tentative enthusiasm. I'm not going. Ethan's smile faltered, but he didn't press. That's okay. Maybe next time. As Sophia watched from the doorway, her emotions churned. She hated how easily Ethan could make the children smile, but she couldn't ignore their happiness. The following weekend, Ethan arrived to pick up the twins for their trip to the aquarium. Oliver stayed behind, retreating to his room despite Sophia's encouragement. At the aquarium, Emma and Lucas ran ahead, marveling at the colorful fish and towering tanks. Ethan followed closely, his heart swelling at their laughter. He hadn't realized how much he missed until now. Thanks for taking us, Emma said shyly as they stood in front of a massive shark tank. It's my pleasure, Ethan replied. I want to do this more often, if it's okay with you. Lucas grinned. Yeah, I guess you're not so bad. The words were lighthearted, but they felt like a breakthrough. Back at home, Oliver sat on the floor of his room, headphones on and a sketch pad in his lap. He was drawing a scene from his favorite video game, the lines sharp and precise. The knock on his door startled him. Go away, he called, assuming it was Sophia. The door opened anyway, and Ethan stepped inside cautiously. Oliver frowned, pulling off his headphones. What do you want? "I just wanted to say hi," Ethan said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "I saw the sketch you left on the table downstairs. It's really good." Oliver's frown deepened. "You looked at my stuff?" "It was on the table," Ethan said gently. "I wasn't snooping. I just thought it was impressive." Oliver shrugged, clearly unimpressed by the compliment. Ethan hesitated, then stepped closer. "You know, I used to draw a lot when I was your age." Oliver raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" Ethan smiled. "Yeah. My mom hated it because I doodle on everything. Homework, walls, even my textbooks. She said it was a waste of time, but I loved it." Oliver's posture relaxed slightly, though his expression remained guarded. "Do you still draw?" "Not as much as I'd like," Ethan admitted. "But maybe you could show me sometime." "I'd love to see more of what you've done." Oliver glanced at his sketchpad, then back at Ethan. "Maybe." It wasn't much, but it was enough to give Ethan hope. Later that evening, Sophia found Ethan in the kitchen, rinsing out a coffee mug. "What are you doing?" she asked, her tone cautious. "Trying," Ethan replied simply. "With Oliver. With all of them. I just want to make it right." Sophia sighed, leaning against the counter. "They're starting to warm up to you. But if you hurt them, Ethan, I'll never forgive you." "I won't," he said earnestly. "I promise." The first time, Sophia allowed herself to believe him. Just a little. The courtroom was filled with a tense silence as Sophia and Ethan sat on opposite sides, their lawyers positioned before the judge. The air was heavy with anticipation, each party preparing for the battle that would determine their family's future. Sophia adjusted her blouse nervously, glancing at her attorney, who leaned over to reassure her. "Stay calm. We'll focus on the facts." Ethan sat upright, his face a mask of determination. He had spent weeks preparing for this, knowing he couldn't afford to fail. His lawyer stood and began addressing the court. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Blake, seeks visitation rights to establish a relationship with his children. While he acknowledges his absence in their early years, this was due to circumstances beyond his control. Since learning of their existence, Mr. Blake has taken every step to demonstrate his commitment." Sophia's chest tightened as the words washed over her. She had prepared herself for this moment, but hearing it aloud made her defenses feel brittle. Her attorney rose, countering swiftly. "Your Honor, Ms. Carter has raised her children alone, providing them with stability and love. Mr. Blake's sudden reappearance risks disrupting their lives. His intentions, though well-meaning, must be balanced against the children's emotional well-being." The judge nodded thoughtfully before inviting both parties to present their evidence. Ethan's testimony was the turning point. He stood, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I made mistakes. I wasn't there when I should have been, but I didn't know. If I had, nothing would have kept me away. These children are my family, and I want to prove that I can be the father they deserve." Sophia clenched her fists under the table, her emotions a mix of anger and guilt. She wanted to believe him, but years of pain held her back. When Sophia took the stand, her words carried the weight of a decade of struggle. "Your Honor, I've done everything to protect my children. They're my world. I'm not saying Mr. Blake doesn't deserve a chance, but I'm asking you to consider the impact this will have on them." The judge adjourned the hearing, reserving judgment for a later date. Outside the courtroom, Ethan approached Sophia cautiously. "You were incredible in there," he said. Sophia turned to him, her expression unreadable. "This isn't about winning, Ethan. It's about what's best for them. And I want that too," he replied. "Then prove it," she said before walking away. A week later, a new twist emerged. Ethan's former housekeeper, Morgan, had agreed to testify. Her presence in the courtroom was unexpected, and her words carried a gravity that silenced a room. Morgan spoke clearly, recounting the events that had separated Ethan and Sophia. It was Ethan's mother who interfered. She believed Sophia wasn't suitable and went to great lengths to ensure Ethan never knew about the pregnancy. Sophia was told Ethan didn't want a family, and Ethan was told nothing at all. Gasps rippled through the audience. Sophia's eyes widened, her shock mirrored by Ethan, who sat rigid in his seat. The judge leaned forward. Are you saying there was deliberate manipulation to sever their relationship? Yes, Your Honor, Morgan replied. I regret not speaking out sooner, but I believe the truth is essential now. After the session, Sophia found Ethan in the hallway. You didn't know, she said, her voice trembling. Ethan turned, his face etched with regret. No, I didn't. I'm so sorry, Sophia. If I had known. She nodded, the anger she had carried for years softening slightly. We've both been victims of something bigger than us. I want to fix this, Ethan said, his voice firm. Not just for the kids, but for us. We've lost too much time. Sophia hesitated, torn between mistrust and the flicker of hope his words ignited. That evening, Sophia sat in her living room, her children laughing in the background. The weight of the day settled on her, and for the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that Ethan's intentions might be genuine. In his penthouse, Ethan stared out at the city skyline, a glass of whiskey in hand. Morgan's testimony had been a revelation, and the truth had shaken him to his core. But it had also given him clarity. He wouldn't let anyone take this chance from him again. Vanessa Gray sat in her spacious office, a faint smirk tugging at her lips as she flipped through a glossy magazine featuring a profile on Ethan Blake. The article painted him as a committed father fighting for a chance to connect with his children. Public opinion was shifting in his favor, and it irritated her more than she cared to admit. Mr. Blake is here, her assistant announced, stepping into the room. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Send him in. Ethan strode in, his presence commanding, but there was an edge to his demeanor that made Vanessa sit up straighter. Ethan, she greeted, her tone saccharine. To what do I owe the pleasure? He tossed a folder onto her desk, the contents spilling out, emails, receipts, and correspondences. Vanessa's smile faltered as she glanced at them. What's this? She asked, her tone sharp. Proof, Ethan said coldly. Proof that you've been pulling strings behind my back, spreading lies about Sophia, orchestrating that article that dragged my children into the spotlight. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You're being dramatic. I was helping you, helping me. Ethan's voice rose. By sabotaging my chances with my own family? By meddling in things you have no business being involved in. Vanessa stood, her facade slipping. You think she's better for you? She left you in the past, Ethan. I've been the one by your side all these years. You've been by my side for yourself, not for me, Ethan retorted. This ends now, Vanessa. You're out of my life, out of my company, and out of my family's future. Vanessa's breath hitched, anger and desperation flashing in her eyes. You'll regret this, Ethan. No, he said firmly, turning to leave. The only regret I have is trusting you for so long. The fallout was swift. News broke that Vanessa had been quietly removed from Ethan's company, her role absorbed by other executives. Rumors of her manipulation spread, tarnishing her reputation. She retreated from the public eye, but not before issuing a bitter statement about loyalty and betrayal. Meanwhile, Ethan felt a sense of relief, though it was tinged with regret. Vanessa's downfall was a necessary step, but it was a reminder of how tangled his life had become. Sophia sat at the dining table, her fingers idly tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Across from her, Ethan looked uncharacteristically uncertain. It had been a week since Vanessa's schemes had been exposed, and the revelations had changed the dynamics between them. Thank you, Sophia said finally, breaking the silence. Ethan looked up, surprised. For what? For standing up for us, she clarified. For cutting ties with Vanessa. He shrugged, his gaze dropping to his hands. It's the least I could do after everything. Sophia leaned back in her chair, studying him. There was something different about Ethan now, an earnestness she hadn't seen in years. Why are you trying so hard, Ethan? She asked softly. He met her gaze, his voice steady. Because I don't want to lose this chance. I've already lost so much time. Sophia's heart ached at his words, but she wasn't ready to let her guard down completely. The kids come first, always. I know, Ethan said, and I'll prove to you that I can be the father they deserve. That weekend, Ethan organized a family outing to a nearby park. It was a simple gesture, but one that carried weight. The children hesitated at first, unsure of how to act around him. But as the day went on, laughter filled the air. Ethan played soccer with Lucas and Oliver, their competitive spirits igniting. Emma sat with him afterward, asking him about his childhood. Slowly, the walls began to crumble. "I didn't know you could play," Lucas said as they packed up to leave. Ethan chuckled. "I wasn't half bad back in the day, but I think you've got me beat now." The compliment earned a small smile from Lucas, a victory Ethan didn't take lightly. Back home, Sophia watched the children recount their day with excitement. Ethan lingered near the door, his presence quieter than usual. "Thank you," Sophia said, her voice genuine. Ethan smiled. "They're incredible, Sophia. You've done an amazing job." The words caught her off guard, and for a moment, the animosity between them seemed to dissipate. "Maybe," she said cautiously, "we can find a way to make this work." Ethan nodded, hope flickering in his eyes. "I'd like that." The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the park. Families dotted the open fields, and the laughter of children blended with the sound of rustling leaves. Ethan stood on the grassy hill, holding a kite in his hands, its tail fluttering in the breeze. "Come on, Oliver," he called, waving his youngest son over. Oliver hesitated, his arms crossed, but Sophia's encouraging nod finally spurred him forward. He trudged up the hill reluctantly, his gaze wary as he stopped a few feet from Ethan. Ethan crouched to meet Oliver's eye level. "You ever flown a kite before?" Oliver shrugged. "Once. It didn't work." "Well," Ethan said, smiling, "maybe we can fix that." He handed the kite to Oliver, who took it hesitantly. "Hold it steady, and when I say go, run as fast as you can, okay?" Oliver frowned but nodded, gripping the kite tightly. Ethan unspooled the string, glancing at the sky to gauge the wind. "Ready?" Ethan asked. "Yeah," Oliver muttered. "Go." Oliver took off, his small legs pumping furiously as he dashed down the hill. The kite wobbled precariously before catching a gust of wind, soaring into the sky. Oliver stopped, craning his neck to watch as the kite climbed higher and higher. "I did it," he shouted, a grin breaking across his face. "You sure did," Ethan called back, jogging to his side. The two stood together, watching the kite dance against the backdrop of the setting sun. For the first time, Oliver's guarded expression softened, and he glanced at Ethan with a flicker of admiration. Sophia observed the scene from a distance, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and apprehension. The way Oliver looked at Ethan was new, hopeful. Later, as the family packed up their things, Emma and Lucas excitedly recounted their day. Oliver clutched the kite, his attachment to it symbolic of the small breakthrough he'd made with Ethan. "I'm keeping this," Oliver declared, hugging the kite to his chest. "Of course," Ethan said with a smile. "It's yours." On the drive home, the children's chatter filled the car, a sound that brought a rare sense of peace to Sophia. She glanced at Ethan in the rear-view mirror. His expression was relaxed, content, a far cry from the man she'd confronted weeks ago. As they pulled into the driveway, Sophia spoke softly. "Thank you, Ethan." "For today?" He nodded. "Anytime." For the first time in years, Sophia wondered if they could find a way to coexist, not as enemies, but as a family. Vanessa paced her penthouse, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Her downfall had been swift and brutal, and she blamed Ethan for every second of it. He had turned against her, humiliated her, and left her with nothing. But Vanessa Gray wasn't one to go down without a fight. She poured herself a glass of wine, her mind racing. She knew Ethan's weak spot now, his newfound family. If she couldn't have him, she would ensure Sophia didn't either. Picking up her phone, she dialed a number she hadn't called in years. When the line connected, her voice was smooth as silk. "I need a favor. Something discreet." The voice on the other end agreed, and Vanessa smiled. She wasn't done yet. The next morning, Sophia received an envelope on her doorstep. Inside was a set of documents, custody papers. They alleged that she was unfit to care for her children due to fabricated claims of neglect and financial instability. Her hands trembled as she read the accusations. Panic coursed through her veins. Ethan arrived later that day to pick up the children for an outing. He immediately noticed Sophia's pale complexion and the envelope on the counter. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice concerned. Sophia handed him the papers silently. His eyes scanned the documents, his expression darkening with each word. "This has Vanessa written all over it," he said through gritted teeth. Sophia sank into a chair, her head in her hands. "I can't fight this, Ethan. I don't have the resources." "You won't have to," Ethan said firmly. "I'll handle it." Ethan confronted Vanessa that evening, storming into her penthouse unannounced. "Have you lost your mind?" he demanded, throwing the custody papers onto the table. Vanessa remained seated, sipping her wine with feigned indifference. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play games with me, Vanessa," Ethan snapped. "You've gone too far this time." Vanessa smirked. "You made me the villain, Ethan. Now I'm just living up to the role you gave me." Ethan leaned closer, his voice low and dangerous. "If you come near my family again, I'll make sure you regret it. Do you understand me?" Vanessa's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "You're so predictable, Ethan. Always protecting the damsel in distress." Ethan didn't respond. He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. As Vanessa stared at the closed door, her smirk faded. For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. The courtroom was filled with hushed tension as Sophia and Ethan sat side by side, their lawyers flanking them. Across the aisle, Vanessa's lawyer stood, a smug expression betraying their confidence. The fabricated custody case had consumed Sophia's thoughts for weeks, leaving her exhausted and fraught with worry. "Ms. Carter," the judge began, his voice even, "you have been accused of negligence and financial instability. Do you wish to address these claims?" Sophia rose from her seat, her hands trembling slightly. "Your Honor, the claims made against me are completely false. I have worked tirelessly to provide a stable, loving home for my children. My record speaks for itself." She outlined her years of sacrifice, balancing work, raising 3 children, and maintaining a home without any external support. Her words were passionate, laced with the determination of a mother who had built her life around protecting her family. Vanessa's lawyer attempted to counter, presenting photos and statements that painted Sophia in a negative light. But their argument was weak, unraveling under scrutiny. Ethan's lawyer stood next, his voice firm and direct. "Your Honor, we have evidence that these allegations were orchestrated by Ms. Vanessa Gray in a deliberate attempt to interfere with Mr. Blake's efforts to reconnect with his family." The room murmured as documents were handed to the judge. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. Sophia glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Vanessa, seated in the back of the room, stiffened as the judge reviewed the evidence. Her confidence faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. After hours of arguments, the judge called for a recess, leaving everyone on edge. Sophia sat in the hallway, her head bowed, while Ethan paced nearby. "She won't win," Ethan said quietly, stopping beside her. Sophia looked up, her eyes red. "I'm not so sure. People like her always seem to find a way." Ethan crouched down to meet her gaze. "Not this time. I won't let her." When the judge returned, his verdict was swift. "The evidence presented against Ms. Carter is unsubstantial and appears to have been fabricated. Custody remains unchanged, with Ms. Carter maintaining primary guardianship. The court also finds Ms. Gray's interference troubling and suggests further investigation." Sophia exhaled sharply, relief washing over her. Ethan smiled faintly, but his focus was on Vanessa, who left the courtroom with her head held high, though her mask of confidence was clearly cracked. Life began to settle into a tentative rhythm after the court case. Sophia could finally breathe easier, though the emotional scars of the ordeal lingered. Ethan, true to his word, made every effort to be present for the children, carving out a role in their lives. One Saturday morning, Sophia found herself watching from the porch as Ethan helped Lucas and Oliver with a woodworking project in the backyard. They were building a birdhouse, the boys eagerly following Ethan's instructions. Emma joined her mother on the porch, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "They're actually laughing," Emma said, nodding toward her brothers. Sophia took a mug, her lips curving into a soft smile. "It's nice, isn't it?" Emma hesitated. "Do you think he's going to stay this time?" Sophia glanced at her daughter, the question cutting deeper than she'd expected. "I think he's trying, and that's more than he's ever done before." Emma nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I like having him around. It feels normal." Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat, unable to respond. Later that day, Ethan stayed for dinner, a rare occurrence that still felt new to everyone. The conversation was light, filled with laughter and stories. For the first time in years, the house felt alive. As the kids went to bed, Sophia lingered in the kitchen, washing dishes. Ethan joined her, drying the plates she handed him. "You didn't have to stay," she said, her tone neutral. "I wanted to," he replied. "This feels good. Like how it should have been." Sophia sighed, setting down a plate. "You can't undo the past, Ethan." "I know," he said softly, "but I can try to make the future better." She turned to him, her expression wary but softened by his sincerity. "We'll see." Ethan left shortly after, but the memory of the evening lingered. Sophia sat in the quiet house, reflecting on how far they had come. For the first time in a long while, hope didn't feel so far away. The sun was setting over the lake, casting a golden glow on the rippling water. Sophia stood on the shore, watching as the children skipped stones, their laughter echoing in the crisp evening air. Ethan sat nearby on a weathered bench, his eyes never leaving the scene. It had been months since the custody battle ended, and while the wounds hadn't fully healed, the scars were beginning to fade. Their new routine had brought stability, but with stability came new questions. As the children wandered farther down the shore, Ethan motioned for Sophia to join him. She hesitated, her heart beating faster, but she eventually sat beside him. "I was thinking," Ethan began, his voice calm but tinged with nerves, "about how far we've come." Sophia arched a brow. "We've come a long way, that's for sure." He turned to her, his expression serious. "I don't want to just be a part of their lives. I want to be part of yours too." Sophia blinked, her stomach flipping at the weight of his words. "Ethan." He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a delicate ring, a simple band with a single, shining diamond. "I know I don't deserve a second chance," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "But I'm asking for one anyway. I want us to be a family, not just for the kids, but for us. Will you marry me?" Sophia's breath caught. She stared at the ring, her mind racing. Memories of their broken past collided with the progress they'd made. Could she trust him again? Could they truly rebuild what had been lost? "Ethan, this isn't something I can decide right now," she said, her voice trembling. "I understand," he said softly. "Take all the time you need." He closed the box and tucked it away, but the question lingered between them like the setting sun, warm, hopeful, but uncertain. That night, as Sophia lay in bed, she replayed the proposal in her mind. She thought about the man Ethan had become, the way he had fought to earn her trust, and the love he showed their children. Could she take the risk? Months later, the little church in Sophia's neighborhood buzzed with quiet excitement. Close friends and family filled the pews, the air thick with anticipation. Sophia stood in the back room, adjusting the lace on her dress as Emma helped pin a strand of flowers in her hair. "You look beautiful, Mom," Emma said, her eyes shining. Sophia smiled, her nerves softened by her daughter's words. "Thank you, sweetheart." Oliver peeked his head in, grinning. "You ready?" She nodded, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." The ceremony was simple, but it felt perfect. As Sophia walked down the aisle, her eyes locked on Ethan, who stood at the altar, his expression filled with quiet awe. When she reached him, he took her hands, his grip warm and steady. The officiant's words blurred in Sophia's mind, but when Ethan said, "I do," it was as though the entire room disappeared, leaving just the two of them. "I do," she whispered in return, her voice trembling with emotion. The reception was held in a nearby park, strung with fairy lights that twinkled as dusk settled in. The children ran around, laughing with their cousins and friends, while Sophia and Ethan sat at a small table, watching it all. "Do you think we can really do this?" Sophia asked, her voice low. Ethan reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "We already are." They sat in silence for a moment, taking in the scene before them, a family brought together not by perfection, but by persistence, forgiveness, and love. As the night wound down, Ethan pulled Sophia onto the makeshift dance floor. They swayed to the soft music, her head resting on his shoulder. "I don't deserve you," Ethan murmured. Sophia pulled back, meeting his gaze. "We've both made mistakes, Ethan, but we're here now. That's what matters." He nodded, a smile breaking across his face. "Here's to new beginnings." Sophia smiled, leaning in to kiss him softly. "Here's to us." As the family gathered for a group photo, laughter filled the air. The journey had been long and painful, but had brought them here, to a place of healing, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this story as much as we enjoyed sharing it with you. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps us grow and bring you more amazing stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Let us know in the comments which part of the story had the biggest impact on you. Was it the heartfelt family moments, the intense courtroom drama, or the unexpected twists? Also, we're always looking for new ideas. If you have a story you'd like to see on our channel, leave your suggestions below. Your input inspires us, and who knows, your idea might just be the next big story we bring to life. Thanks for being part of our community, and we'll see you in the next video. Let me know if you'd like this phrased differently or tailored further.